Okay, good to see everybody today. And just a reminder that next Sunday is our annual Tashlich program right after Minyan. So we will not be having Talmud class next Sunday, but the following Sundays will be good. 13th, 20th, and 27th are all good, but then November 3rd, we will not be meeting either. Okay, so just a reminder about that. Let me share my screen.
What's the rain policy for Tashlich?
Well, it's supposed to be really nice. So, but if it's raining, it'll be at shul. So, okay. So I believe we left off here. Just a second, just see what page this is. I just need to move people down here. There we go. Yes, we're on page 13 of the Koran. And we're up to the second paragraph here on the page. Okay, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So, good to see everybody. Good to see you, Arnie. Saw you in shul yesterday and this morning, but didn't get a chance to talk to you about your extensive trip. Looking forward to hearing about it. And so, we're talking about partitions and how to define a mechitza that the Mishnah had talked about. Joint owners of a courtyard can do a mechitza in their courtyard, and sometimes one owner can force the other to put a mechitza in. So the mechitza, how do we define it? Is it a division or is it a partition? What is it keeping out? Is it for privacy? And then the question is damage caused, your flashlight's on, damage caused by sight, is that considered damage or not? So, of course, we've been all over the place talking about all these things. So now the Gemara continues its analysis of the Mishnah. So let's just go back to the Mishnah and see if I can find my place again after that. Here we go. Just the Mishnah is partners who wish to make a partition in a jointly owned courtyard build the wall for the partition in the middle of the courtyard. What is this wall fashioned from? In a place where it's customary to build such a wall with non-chiseled stone or chiseled stone or small bricks or large bricks, they must build the wall with that material. Everything is in accordance with the regional custom. And then it talks about how thick it has to be based on the material used. Okay, so just a second. We have to get back to page 13. Okay, so I think this is it. I just make sure. Yes, this is it. So the Gemara continues its analysis of the Mishnah. To what case did you interpret the Mishnah to be referring? To a case where the courtyard is not subject to the halacha of division. So, but if there is no halacha of division, then if they wished to divide the courtyard, what of it? How can either one force the other to build a wall? So in other words, if it's a courtyard that is not subject to a requirement for there to be a division, then how could one owner require the other owner to put up a wall? If there's no halachic requirement for it, how can that be? If the parties no longer want to build a wall, let them retract. Rabbi Asi said that Rabbi Yochanan said, it is referring to a case where each party performed an act of acquisition with the other, confirming their respective commitments. Therefore, neither party can retract. So, if they had kind of like a contract, but maybe not a written contract, but a verbal contract, which also had a physical sign. So like Michael is sitting, well, you can't, can you see? There's Michael, okay? So if I reach an agreement, a verbal agreement with Michael, our physical agreement to show that we agree, it would be a handshake. Okay, or let's say I agreed to buy his iPhone. I would pull the iPhone out of his hand with something else of value to show that I've acquired it. Okay, so that's the performing the act. If you're buying a donkey, you have to pull the donkey by its reins a little bit to show that you've acquired the donkey. It's not just handing the money over to the donkey owner, you have to pull the donkey too. So there's all kinds of physical acts of acquisition. And once the physical act of acquisition takes place, then according to this opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, neither party can retract. Okay. So the Gemara asks, but even if each party performed an act of acquisition with the other, what of it? It's merely a verbal acquisition, meaning there is no actual transfer of property, but only a verbal agreement to act in a certain manner in the future and not a true act of acquisition. In other words, let's say Michael and I co-owned a courtyard. We agree that we're going to build a wall, but what's the big deal? It's not like I'm acquiring Michael's part of the courtyard or vice versa. So there's no exchange of property. We're just agreeing to some kind of condition. So can you agree to something that is not halachically required? So the Gemara answers, they performed an act of acquisition with the other with regard to directions. That is, not only did they verbally agree to divide the courtyard, they also determined which of them would get which part of the courtyard. Consequently, the acquisition related to actual property, a particular plot of land. In other words, let's say Michael and I agree to divide the property north-south or east-west or diagonally, either way. So there's a variety of ways to divide the property equally, and that the way to divide the property could be considered kind of an acquisition. Rav Ashi said, for example, this one walked through his designated portion and performed an act demonstrating ownership there, and that one walked through his designated portion and performed an act of ownership, an act demonstrating ownership there. So there's a note there. Just a second. Let me find it. Where did the notes go? There it is. This one walked. He went to his designated portion and performed some type of act demonstrating ownership, for example, hoeing. So he didn't just walk through his property. He also showed that it's his property by starting the process of making a row for planting the seeds, right? And the background, where did background go? There it is. Performed an act demonstrating ownership. The term chazaka can be used in different senses. That's the to hold on to something, to hold it, to grab it is a physical act demonstrating ownership. So the term chazaka can be used in different senses. With regard to legal claims, it refers to unchallenged possession of property. The physical possession of an item for a period of time enjoyed by someone, varying according to the nature of the item, serves as proof that the person in possession is, as he claims, the legal owner. One who is able to prove uninterrupted possession for the necessary period is no longer required to produce documentary evidence of his legal title to the item, kind of like squatter's rights. With regard to the transfer of ownership of immovable property, the term chazaka refers to the performance of an action that demonstrates ownership. The performance of that action constitutes the formal mode of acquisition through which one formally acquires property received as a gift or purchased from another person. Okay? So Rav Ashi, we know that we're near an end of a discussion in the Gemara when we get to Rav Ashi because he's from the last generation of rabbis in the Gemara. So now, on to the red S, which means a slightly different topic. The Mishnah teaches, in a place where it is customary to build, right? So we're talking about that next clause of the Mishnah, the kind of material used to build partitions. That's whatever is customary in the place, that's what the co-owners have to use. So in a place where it's customary to build such a wall with non-chiseled stone or chiseled stone or small bricks or large bricks, they must build the wall with that material. All right, so now they're going to define. So non-chiseled stone, gevil, chiseled stone, gazit, small bricks, kefisin, or large bricks, levenim. Okay, so our English translation already defined it, but the Gemara is going to be defining those different materials. The Gemara identifies the various building materials. Gevil, that's the non-chiseled stone, refers to stones that are not planed. Gazit means stones that are planed. As it is written, all these were of costly stones, according to the measures of chiseled stones, sawed with saws, within and without. All right, so I don't know anything about masonry, but I do notice how walls are built. And I know that I've seen brick, and I see how bricklayers do their job. And, you can also watch it on YouTube. Sometimes when I go to YouTube, you get videos that are suggested to watch. And for some reason, bricklaying is a video that comes up. So it's really an interesting process to watch bricklayers do their work. But be that as it may, if Lenore were here listening to me say this, she'd be so embarrassed. The stones, though, that I've seen, that you just take a pile of stones, and it looks like somehow the walls that are built out of these stones, they're placed in such a way that it somehow magically is transformed by the stone layer to make a beautiful wall. Now, so like old walls in New England or other places like that from Revolutionary or Civil War times, you could see walls like that still in existence, where you just take the stones that are available and make it. But I've seen also other stones that have been chiseled in some way, shaped in some ways, and then mortar put in between them so that the stones kind of look like they've been shaped in some way. So they're giving a verse from the Bible in talking about gazit being the proof text for that these are chiseled stones. So this verse teaches that chiseled stones are those that have been planed and smoothened. Kefisin refers to small bricks. Levenim means large bricks. Okay, so our English translation already translated that for us, like the non-bold, based on the bold, which we just found here. Okay, now there is a language here. So, okay, so I don't think that we need to look at the language here. So let's go on. And the Haggadah, about how they built the pyramids, maybe, right, or built the cities. Yes, Levenim is there, and also it's in the Tower of Babel in Genesis. The Levenim are there.
So the work was even harder. You weren't just dealing with little bricks. You were dealing with
large bricks, but who knows what large bricks are? I don't know. Are they cinder blocks versus bricks? If we put it in that kind of context today, so I don't know. Are they heavier? Also, don't know whether bricks like that were heavy or not. Okay. Rabbah, the son of Rava, said to Rav Ashi, "From where do you know that Gavil refers to stones that are not planed, and this extra handbreadth that a wall of Gavil has compared to what a wall of Gazit has is for the protruding edges," right? It's back in the Mishnah, it told us how wide the wall has to be based on the kind of material used for building the wall. So that is, a wall of Gavil is 6 handbreadths thick because the stones have not been planed and smoothened and therefore protrude somewhat outward. Perhaps Gavil refers to plain stones that are half the thickness of Gazit, namely just 2.5 handbreadths, as compared to Gazit, which is 5 handbreadths thick. And this extra handbreadth is a wall of Gavil. In a wall of Gavil is for the space between the 2 rows. That is, a wall of Gavil is actually 2 walls of plain stones that are each 2.5 handbreadths thick, and the 2 walls are separated by 1 handbreadth, which is later filled in with mortar for added strength, like we see in this picture. All right, this looks like a brick wall, 2 brick walls with stuff in between the wall. Okay, why it would be built that way, I don't know. Why not just put the 2 walls next to each other, or just have 1 wall? Why do you need the 2 walls with stuff in between? Maybe it makes it stronger, yes. So, but you're talking about a courtyard. Why do you need such a strong wall in a courtyard? So, that's I don't know. So anyway, the question for the rabbis of the Gemara, who may not be masons themselves, is to actually figure out what kind of wall we're talking about and what was, so not just what the material is, but how the wall was built when you use that material. So is a Gavil wall this kind of wall that this picture is showing us, or is a Gavil wall a different kind of wall? Okay, why it matters, I don't know, but it matters in terms of how much space is taken away from both people's property in the courtyard in order, or in the garden, how much space is taken away in order to build this wall. Okay, so a proof for this explanation, that is, that it's a double wall with mortar or dirt in between, can be brought from what we say, that is, that kefisin are small bricks, whereas levanim are large bricks, twice the thickness of small bricks. And this extra handbreadth of thickness that a wall of kefisin has compared to what a wall of levanim has is for the space between the 2 rows of small bricks. So in other words, if we have 2 kinds of bricks, kefisin and levanim, then maybe Gavil and Gazit should be parallel to kefisin and levanim, just as kefisin and levanim, small, large bricks, maybe Gavil and Gazit, small, large stones. Okay, so that you can apply the same rules of how brick walls are built to how stone walls are built, perhaps. Rav Ashi said to him, and according to your reasoning, from where do we derive that kefisin are small bricks? Rather, the sages learned this as a tradition, and so too, they learned as a tradition that Gavil refers to non-planed stones. In other words, the tradition was passed down from generation to generation, that this is how it was understood. Okay, so, in other words, this is just a hint of how the understanding of the Gemara was passed down from one generation to the next. And we have a hint of it also in Rashi. Okay, so Rashi lived 500 years after the publishing of the Gemara, after the editing of the Gemara. And so what I'm suggesting is that not only is the text of the Gemara passed down from one generation to the next, and the text of the Mishnah passed down one generation to the next until it's written down in an accepted way, so too how we understand the words, like the language of it, and also the argument is passed down from generation to generation. So until Rashi, we had nobody write down that commentary. The commentary was passed down in the houses of study. So just as the people studied the text, they were also studying the accepted understanding of that text until Rashi put it down for us for the first time in his commentary to the Gemara. So just the process of yeshiva learning, I don't know how it is today. So in other words, if we were to walk into an ultra-Orthodox yeshiva today, would the way they study Gemara be the way that the rabbis have studied the Gemara and students have studied the Gemara for 1,500 years? That I don't know. But I think scholars agree that how Rashi studied the Gemara is how it was studied for up to his time. So he had the accepted tradition from Babylonia to Europe to his yeshiva in Alsace-Lorraine. Okay, so the rabbis themselves taught students. The students moved to other communities, and they kept that tradition alive in teaching their students, who then moved to another community and taught their students. Okay, so that's what I'm sorry for that tangent, but that's this idea. The sages learned this as a tradition, and that's how from one rabbinical academy to the next, from rabbi to student who becomes the next rabbi to his students who then become rabbis. This is how the tradition passed down. Now you can certainly understand from that because these are oral traditions, there could be mistakes from one generation to the next in conveying these meanings. So yes, that could happen, but this is the beauty, really, of how the Talmudic tradition gets passed down. Yeah, Michael.
Anywhere in Rashi's commentary, does he acknowledge that this is what he's learned historically?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know Rashi well enough to know all that he includes and maybe any side comment that he would include. Some of his side comments are translating a word into French, but I don't know. I don't know if I know that his students in their commentary say that the master taught us. Okay, so Rashi's students and subsequent generations of writings that we have. So on the traditional page of the Gemara, you have Rashi on one side, on the inside part of the margin, and then on the other side of the page are his grandchildren, the Tosafot, and the Tosafot will often say, "Our master taught us." But Rashi might refer to some other books like Sefer HaYashar or some other text or some other lexicon. He might refer to that. But I don't know if he refers to, how in that way, I guess he's showing how the one part of the tradition is getting passed down. Okay, so the Gemara presents a different version of the discussion. There are those who say that Rav Acha, son of Rav Avia, said to Rav Ashi. So first, it was Rabba, the son of Rava, saying to Rav Ashi, what do we know about this kind of wall, and is it this double wall with dirt in it or not? So here's a different tradition of understanding Gevil, Gezit, Kefisin, and Levanim. So there are those who say that Rav Acha, son of Rav Avya. So you can see how they're not sure. Is it Rava, son of Rabba, right? Rabba, son of Rava, two names that sound alike? Or is it Acha, son of Avya, also two names that sound alike? What is the same is that they're talking to Rav Ashi. So we just don't know which is the right tradition. So this is the beauty also of the Gemara in maintaining both traditions, because they don't know which one is really the authentic or the better tradition to keep to understand these Gevil, Gezit, Kefisin, Levanim. So according to this tradition, from where do you know that Kefisin are small bricks, 1/2 the width of large bricks, and this extra handbreadth of thickness that a wall of Kefisin has compared to what a wall of Levanim has covers the space between the two rows of Kefisin, right? Where do we know how Kefisin walls are built and Levanim walls are built? Perhaps you should say, what are Kefisin? Stones that are not planed, and this extra handbreadth of thickness that a wall of Kefisin has in comparison to what a wall of Levanim has is for the protruding edges. So maybe we've translated Kefisin wrong. Maybe Kefisin are what we're translating as Gevil. And proof for this explanation can be brought from what we say. That is, that Gevil refers to stones that are not planed, whereas Gezit means planed stones, and this extra handbreadth of thickness that a wall of Gevil has compared to what a wall of Gezit has is for the protruding edges. Rav Ashi said to him, and according to your reasoning, from where do we derive that Gevil are stones that are not planed? Rather, the sages learned this as a tradition. Here too, they learned as a tradition that Kefisin are small bricks. Okay, so we don't know for sure, but this is the tradition, and this is what it is. So, it is interesting. This is kind of like the little bit of history that might be included just by chance in Gemara. So the focus of Gemara is not to teach history. The focus of Gemara is not to try to understand sociology, like what were the living circumstances, what were the community like in which the rabbis are living, how were houses built or anything like that. It's just by chance that we might learn things. And even by chance, it's disputed, right? We might learn about how walls are built, but there are two different traditions about how walls are built and what the material are. What kind of stones are these exactly, and how these walls are made, we really don't know. Does it matter? I think it does matter for some historians or building historians to see the development of how buildings were made over time. But, it's fascinating too, because such historians have just uncovered or suggested a story about how Masada was defeated. Like the story in Josephus was, there was a siege by the Romans of at least a year of the fortress, right? And that's the story that got passed down for 2,000 years, and how brave the Jews who were there, and how they decided to martyr themselves by committing suicide because instead of giving in to the Romans themselves. And some historians now think the way the wall was built, like you take a look at the ramp, those of us who have been up to Masada, and instead of going up by the cable car way, have gone the back way and can walk up the Roman ramp, which isn't that hard to do. These building historians have said it only took them a week to build that. So the whole thing then comes literally crashing down, and Josephus's theory of it being a siege for a year by these historians are suggesting no, it was just a week. So does it matter essentially about the tradition of Masada? I don't know. I mean, if historians can ever come and prove this is how the Exodus from Egypt happened, that could be, or if historians can prove that Jesus, that they found Jesus's bones. So finding Jesus's bones would be a major religious challenge to Christianity, right? That could be, right? If you find his bones buried because he was resurrected, so there shouldn't be any bones. So that would be a major, that historical discovery, beyond a shadow of a doubt, would be a major challenge to the basis of Christianity. If we found proof of the Exodus from Egypt and that only 1,000 people crossed the sea instead of 600,000 people, would that necessarily adversely affect the whole story of the Jewish people and the story of Passover? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think it would be affected to the extent that Christianity would be affected. So the role of history in understanding tradition as it passes down, it all depends on what the tradition is that's being passed down. Okay, so now this last paragraph before the next S, Abaye said, learn from it that the space left between the two rows of a wall is always a hand breadth. So this is a hand breadth, these 4 fingers. Okay, so that's a hand breadth. The Gemara comments, this matter applies only when the 2 rows of the wall filled in with mortar. But when they are filled with gravel, more space is required. And there are those who say that this matter applies only when the 2 rows of the wall filled in with gravel. But when mortar is used to fill the space, not as much space is required, and less than a handbreadth suffices. Okay, so it all depends on how you build the wall and how you're filling it in. You're using gravel, using mortar, different thicknesses apply, right? And I think building styles change over time as well, too. I mean, right. So I don't, I've only seen against, again, YouTube videos, cinder block versus brick. And is there mortar being like cement being poured down between two layers of a wall? Yeah, it's all different styles. Yeah, Michael.
The idea of infilling a stone wall with rubble in the middle
Yeah.
comes up at least as far as castle building, because all these major castles weren't all built of chiseled
Right.
stone.
Right.
There was always a rubble layer in the middle.
Right.
And I think because that way it frankly made it a
It's more
stronger
durable.
wall
Right.
without all that extra weight of
Yes.
brick. Yeah.
So, again, those of us who've been to the Old City in Jerusalem know that in the Jewish quarter, there's like this empty area where they found a remnant of the wall of Jerusalem from the time of Hanukkah, the Hasmonean wall. And it looks like that. It's just stones, like non-chiseled stones with mortar or something in between the 2 sides of the wall. So the only thing I'll say about that is that we're talking about a wall for a courtyard or a garden. Why do you need such a strong wall to divide your field up in that way? So I don't know. I can understand if you want to protect your house, or if you want to protect the castle or protect the town, you want to have as strong as a wall as possible. But you need such a strong wall to separate your field? I don't know. So wait, Bess. Yeah.
That's what I don't understand. The whole description that we're getting about what kind of wall, how to build a wall, all the different materials, we're talking about 2 tenants in the courtyard who who agree to have a wall,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
What if they want to have a wall of wood?
So yeah, I think you're supposed to build a wall of how it's commonly built. So if a partition in a courtyard is usually built with wood, then that's the kind of partition that they're going to agree to. You can't force one partner, can't force the other to have a fancier, stronger wall than what is usually accepted for that kind of wall.
But if they both agree,
If they want a fancier wall, they can agree to whatever they want to agree, if they agree. But you can't force, one can't force the other to agree to something that's not required.
Or less than, why is
That's
there?
right. That's right. They can't, each of them can't be cheaper than than is the accepted norm. And you can't force someone to spend more money than the accepted norm either.
But can they be allowed, if they agree, to do less than the custom norm? That's not.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think because then it's a useless wall because it can degrade easily, and then also the produce from one field can encroach into the other.
I would suggest.
Yes, Michael.
What they're doing here is, the idea is we're dividing land between two people. And since there are no, there's no public records, no microfilmed records, what you want to build is the kind of wall that clearly says to the world, these two people have divided their land. And so the kind of wall you'd use strikes me as being the same kind of wall you would use for the exterior of a building, where it's going to bear the weight of a second story or of a roof. So it's got to be wider. An interior wall on your own house, you could build the flimsiest partition you want, in the same way that anybody could build a wall in their own courtyard for a chicken coop or whatever, and it could be a flimsy structure. But if it's a demising wall between two different sets of ownership, maybe they want to make it clear to the public that these people have divided their land for future generations and whatever. So it's got to be the kind of wall you would use for a really exterior purpose.
Maybe. I guess it's for the public, but at least it's for the heirs
Yeah,
of these
certainly,
two
yeah,
owners.
for the next generation.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what if we're talking of a privacy barrier? It doesn't have
It's
to.
not just for privacy. It could be for produce encroaching.
But we could be talking about just a privacy barrier.
We could be. That came up in discussion, but yes.
So is it necessary to go to
So it depends. It depends what kind of wall it is. If it's a courtyard wall? Is it a privacy wall? Is it a marking demarcating the field for produce? So it's an outer wall out in the open. It all depends. Debbie, did you have a question? You're muted.
I was just going to say, it's kind of like codes today, building codes. Perhaps it was merely a way of having uniformity.
Right. Yes, I think so.
Rather than the haphazard, I'm going to do it my way.
Right. Yeah, no, I think so. Absolutely. Arnie.
Wasn't this whole thing coming up because they wanted to build a mechitza? In other words, there was a specific reason.
The mechitza is not as we know it today for synagogue. So yes, they wanted to build a partition to to show that their property is evenly divided. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that's what the Mishnah says. Okay. So now, because we're talking about stones, we're going on a tangent. The Gemara asks, is this to say that in a case of a wall of chiseled stone, if for every 4 cubits of height, there are 5 handbreadths of thickness, the wall will stand. And if not, it will not stand, as this is the required ratio between a wall's height and its thickness. So now they're teaching us some physics and engineering of how to build a wall. Every 4 cubits of height, so that's every 6 feet of height, there are 5 handbreadths. So I don't know how much a handbreadth is, what the standard width is. So let's say a handbreadth is, I don't know, 3 inches, 4 inches, so 20 inches, 1.5 feet maybe. So for every 6 feet of height, there's 1.5 feet of thickness the wall will stand. And if not, it will not stand. So it has to be a particular minimum of thickness for the wall to be a durable wall, as this is a required ratio between a wall's height and its thickness. So, but wasn't there the 1 cubit thick wall separating the Holy of Holies from the sanctuary of the temple, separating the Holy of Holies from the sanctuary, which was 30 cubits high, and its thickness was only 6 handbreadths, and nevertheless stood? So, in other words, if we're saying that it has to have this ratio, for every 6 feet of height, it has to have, I don't know, a foot and a half of thickness. If something is 30 cubits, so 30 times is 45 feet high, I think, is what 30 cubits is, and its thickness was only 6 handbreadths. How do we know? Like, if we have the ratio that's supposed to apply to all walls, how is the wall of the Holy of Holies in the separating it from the rest of the sanctuary? How was that wall able to stand when it had a thinner ratio? The Gemara answers, since there was an extra handbreadth of thickness, it was able to stand even to such a great height. So that's how that wall in the temple stood. So there's a note, an extra handbreadth. Tosafot point out that the Gemara provides a different solution, namely that the 1 cubit partition between the Holy of Holies and the rest of the sanctuary stood because of the stable manner in which it was attached to the ceiling. So there was that extra attachment there. So it wasn't just about standing, freestanding on the ground. It had like a brace or a support in the ceiling. So the Gemara asks, and what is the reason that in the second temple they did not fashion an Amah Teraxin to separate between the Holy of Holies and the sanctuary as they had done in the first temple? That's this wall, the Holy of Holies, the wall separating the Holy of Holies from the sanctuary of the temple. So that was there in the first temple based on the description in 1 Kings. Why didn't the second temple have that? The Gemara answers, when a partition stands, even though it's only 6 handbreadths thick, it is able to remain standing up to 30 cubits in height, but it will not be able to stand if it is more than that height. The second temple was taller than the first temple, and therefore the partition separating the Holy of Holies from the sanctuary also had to be higher. The Gemara comments, and from where do we derive that the second temple was taller than the first temple? Right? How do we know that? As it's written, the glory of this latter house shall be greater than that of the former. So that's the prophet Haggai, and he was the prophet from around the time of the building of the second temple. So, and he's prophesying that the glory of this latter house shall be greater than that of the former. So, meaning it's going to be bigger. Rav and Shmuel disagree about the meaning of the verse. Some say it was Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar who disagreed as to its meaning. One of them said that it means that the second temple would be greater in size, in the size of its structure, that is taller. And one of them said that it'll be greater in years, meaning that the second temple will stand for a longer period of time than the first temple. So the first temple stood from around the year, let's say, I'm roughly guesstimating, 900 to 586. So what is that? 314 years, let's say, give or take. The second temple, let's say it was built in the year 500, it stood for 570 years. So yes, the second temple did stand longer than the first temple. Now also, the second temple was adjusted and renovated. King Herod added to it. So does that count also in terms of how it's bigger than the first temple? So, okay. And the Gemara comments that this is true, and that is true. That it was also, yes, it was bigger, taller, and yes, it stood for a longer time. Meaning that the second temple was taller than the first temple and also stood for a longer period of time. The Gemara asks, if so, if the second temple building was taller, then to separate between the Holy of Holies and the sanctuary and the second temple, they should have made a wall 30 cubits high and then made a curtain for the rest of the height, the 70 cubit difference in height between the first and second temples. Right, so in other words, they're saying that the second temple was 100 cubits high, the first temple was 30 cubits high. So you'd have a curtain hanging from the ceiling that stretched down to the top of the wall, the 30 cubits. So in other words, for the rabbis, the measurements of the first temple were God ordained. And so the God ordained measurement of the first temple should be the measurement for the second temple as well. So there's that kind of thing nagging at the rabbis. How could it be that the second temple was different in measurement than the first temple? This would have been impossible, that is, to stretch a curtain down, as even when a 30 cubit wall that is 6 handbreadths thick stands, it is due to the ceiling and plaster which attaches it to the ceiling that it stands. But without a ceiling and plaster holding it in place, it does not stand, right? So a 45-foot high wall needs to be wide enough for it to be freestanding unless it's braced somehow. So that's the rabbis saying that they've done the engineering work, or engineers told them that this is how it has to be. The Gemara continues, but they should have made a wall as high as can possibly stand by itself, and then should have made a curtain for the rest of the height. Abaye said the sages learned as a tradition that the partition separating the Holy of Holies from the sanctuary should be built either entirely as a wall or entirely as a curtain. It should be built either entirely as a wall, as is learned from the first temple, or it should be built entirely as a curtain, as is learned from the tabernacle. At no time, however, was there a partition that combined a wall and a curtain. So, the rabbis of the Gemara have no idea what the temple looked like. They weren't there. It was destroyed at least 200 years before they were even alive. So there were traditions that came down from the time of the Mishnah. And even in the Mishnah, there were only a few rabbis of the time of the Mishnah who actually saw the temple. So their traditions, like there's a tradition about how the incense was made, and there's a lengthy formula and recipe that's given there. Do we know for sure that that's how the incense was made? It's just a tradition that passed down until it was edited 200 years after the temple was destroyed. So we don't know for sure. Okay, so all of this is tradition upon tradition. So you're trying to apply engineering science to what the tradition is about what the wall should look like. And either based on the Torah or based on the Bible, this is what the Mishkan looked like, or this is what the temple looked like, the first temple was supposed to look like. And therefore, the second temple was supposed to look like that too. And then the question's going to be, what's the third temple going to look like? Right? Well, the ultra-Orthodox are praying for the day when the third temple will be built. And there are people studying this in yeshiva so that they'll know not just how to bring the sacrifices, but also how to build the temple. So when the architects come in the time of the Messiah, and the design build team comes, they'll know exactly what the specs are so that it'll be built to code. And this is religious code, not just engineering code. Okay, so let's stop here for today because I have to get to the teen class in a couple of minutes. So again, we'll meet again in 2 weeks. Wish everybody a Shana Tova, happy and a healthy new year. Emphasis on the healthy, and hopefully we'll see you in shul at some point over the holidays as well. And take care, everybody.
And a good week.
Yes.
Good week.